Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Risking It All podcast. We're delighted to be joined by our guest this week, Cam Hunter, who is actually the person who records our podcast every week. So we've managed to talk him into a bit of a different role. Cam and his dad own the Glasgow Podcast Studio, and he's joined with us to have a wee chat about his history and his background and how he got into podcasting.
Aye. I'm not used to being on this side at all. I think we've spoken about that beforehand of it coming on. I'm just like, oh god, it's horrible. It's like an interview. I'm interviewing for a job in my work.
No, I've got loads of questions, Cam. So let's get started. Obviously, first of all, our introduction into podcasting, we are absolute noobs. Never done it before. Didn't have a clue. So having you to actually guide us has been amazing, mate. We can't thank you enough. And we can't thank you enough for your time as well today. So before we get into that, take us back to the start, Cam. Talk to us about, your upbringing and how you get, your introduction into podcasting.
Well, so grew up in Kirky and Tilk. It's like the canal capital of Scotland or something like that. So, really cool. And my dad was podcasting way back in 2005, and I would have been 4 or 5 at the time. So he used to get me on to do wee movie reviews and stuff. Again, we were talking about that beforehand. If you think I've got a squeaky voice now, man, back then, could you imagine listening? That would have been brutal. But I would just kind of I'd get me on and speak about movies and things like that. But I'd always kind of been interested in sort of the audio side and video editing and stuff like that. So school, fine. Just kind of cruised by, didn't particularly enjoy it. Plenty of sickies. Used to put my head up against the radiator to try and pretend that I had a fever and stuff like that, not to go in.
I would turn around and ask your dad behind the curtain who's recording if that's still the same now. But
I know. Well, don't. But it was fine. Just kind of cruised through. Wasn't particularly interested in many subjects at school. I liked PE and English and stuff like that, and more of the creative sides of the two. And
music?
No, I was never really. I couldn't really get to play. I wouldn't understand how, but I really liked kind of sort of graphics and designing things and writing stuff, all that kind of thing.
Right, okay.
So I'd like to say I was cool and I was a musician and stuff, but really I was just like writing stuff, and I was terrible at maths, absolutely terrible. But yeah, school was fine. Meanwhile, I'm at school and stuff. My dad's still kind of working on podcasts and things like that. He'd always been sort of cruising through that line and was kind of getting into sort of social media marketing and all that kind of stuff while I'm sort of fanning about in school. And
were you a well-behaved kid in school?
Nah, I was so chatty.
Oh, yeah.
So chatty and really, really hyper. So hyper when I was wee. I'd get into trouble all the time for chatting and be mischievous and like swearing and stuff like that. And then I kind of fluffed my exams and all that kind of stuff and ended up going to UWS in Paisley studying psychology. And then COVID hit, and then I was like, I don't really want to do this. And I got to my second year in uni and I was like, I'm just going to drop out.
Yeah.
And
is that when you started working in here? So
we actually had a previous, my dad had a previous business selling tools online. So like router cutters and sort of like diamond sharpening kits for like chisels and totally different, from what this is. So when I dropped out, he was like, right, just come and we've got a couple of odd jobs that we can get you to do. So I started off cutting out schematics for router cutters.
Right.
So what would be like a line, and it would be like 35 millimeters, and then like a line across, and so basically building up schematics for router cutters that we could put on the website. Right. So just mind numbing I wasn't even using Photoshop, I was using Inkscape, right, which is a free Photoshop tool that you can basically use to like barely cut things out, and that's what I started doing.
So was that as close to graphic design as you got then?
I had no training in any of that. Like I used to like make YouTube videos and stuff like that, and then design thumbnails for it. That was like the closest that I'd come to doing any of that.
Yeah.
But through the process of nepotism, I was granted the chance to make router cutter schematics. And then from there, it was a case of like, right, well, we need marketing stuff, we need stuff for Instagram, we need photos taken and all that kind of thing. So we quickly started producing all the kind of like pictures and product photography and all that kind of thing. So just teaching ourselves from scratch how to do all that stuff, and really just through a process of trial and error, through the kind of metric of like who was liking it, but then also like seeing the funnel of, right, that did well, people went through the website there, but without any kind of prior training on how to do any of that. It was just a suck it and see thing for the full process.
Yeah.
And then through COVID, that kind of, obviously tradesmen went out working.
Yeah.
So like they're not going to be buying screws or router cutters and stuff like that. So it kind of ended up just falling away. And then through that, we were like, right, we're at a loose end here. Don't really know what to do. We were both working from my dad's flat, still doing wee bits of product photography and sort of graphic design. And then my dad started a podcast again with his pal Neil. It was called Social Media Ruins Everything, and I was kind of and I was in the background as the producer, kind of just because it was live streamed, so we had like, I ended up having like a nice wee following. So I was kind of monitoring the comments and bringing up articles and stuff like that.
God, that's brave.
Yeah,
like, it must be good.
Yeah.
It was just a case of like, because so Neil kind of had like his own fault. He was a joiner, or is a joiner, and he had his own kind of like social media following. So he got folk in to listen to it from that. But that was again like my dad. Like, man, we had loads of stuff, lights and things like that for product photography. But then, as you'll see, these kind of like auto poles and stuff like that. In his bedroom, he set up like a mini studio for the podcast.
Right.
And there's
Some
like
sort of like OnlyFans setup in his bedroom is what I'm imagining.
Hopefully,
chat.
hopefully explained what that was before you encountered it.
So, well, it wasn't. I think we would have made a lot more money if we were doing that. Maybe.
Swiftly moving on.
Swiftly moving on.
So was that your just going back over that then? So you had an introduction to podcasting when you were as young as 5.
Yeah.
And then obviously you mentioned about the first sort of proper one that you get involved in. But take us back even earlier, you know, what was your kind of earliest memories? Obviously your dad, thinking about 2005, God knows how many podcasts there was in the world.
Yeah.
A fraction of a percent of what there is now.
Aye.
So what was your early memories like of that?
So one of my early memories is actually someone coming over from America that he knew that did a podcast, and we went to the pub with him and stuff. I think I was maybe like 6, but obviously you're like, oh, that's someone from America, and we're going to the pub for dinner, and and that was kind of like my first introduction to kind of meeting folk that were outside your normal circle, and people that were creative and doing things and sort of pushing the envelope in a certain direction, because we were Jehovah's Witnesses growing up. So like it was like small, and everyone was like super religious, and you know, you were out knocking doors, and so to meet someone from America that was doing like a podcast, and you know, it was really, really cool. And that was before social media and all the other stuff. So it was just someone that was like really, really out there and doing their thing, and travelling to fucking Scotland to like Auchinloch, which is a wee like village just outside of Lenzie. So that's one of my earliest memories in terms of meeting someone or hearing about and being in that space of podcasting, I suppose.
Yeah, it's crazy. Thinking back then, you know, wasn't even an iPhone. Apple Podcasts probably
Wasn't it a thing?
just not really a thing.
There was iPods. Apple,
Yeah.
so Apple was a massive early proponent of podcasting, and it's one of the main reasons why a lot of people got into it. So in the beginning, it was just a case of you had like an RSS feed, which I don't really. I'm not great at explaining this technically, because I know people out there will know a lot more than me, ridiculously. But it's basically just like it's like an envelope that you can put anything in. So you can put like a video file or an audio file or like pictures and stuff like that. It was used for blogging originally.
Right.
And then someone figured out that no, you could actually use this to host audio. So an RSS feed is what pushes your podcast out onto things like Spotify and Apple and Amazon and all that kind of stuff now. But Apple was one of the really early adopters of the RSS feed that allowed people to update and post their podcast onto iTunes at the time. So iTunes was like fucking obviously huge, it still is, but at the time it was like
iTunes, like proper iTunes, when like everything had to go through it, and it took up so much space in your laptop.
Yeah.
Then there was a new version and it took you forever to update it. God, it's all so seamless now. But
it is, I
remember back to even like God, I don't even know if I should say this because it's definitely illegal, but like the illegal streaming apps that you used to download onto your computer. BearShare was one that sprang to mind.
LimeWire. You get like 50 million viruses from it as well. Your computer's immediately bricked. But it allowed people, like, it was like you say, it wasn't like back then it wasn't seamless. Now it is. You can kind of quickly create a podcast and upload it, and it's on iTunes or Apple Podcasts and all other platforms that you need it to within the space of like a day.
Yeah.
But back then it was a case of if you were doing podcasting, you were a fucking nerd, man. Like you were really into kind of like behind the scenes, how all that kind of stuff works, and early adopters were really like
technically
and a lot of the early ones were about sort of the technology of podcasting and all that kind of stuff. But it obviously quickly was adopted by loads of other folk, and a lot of comedians actually were really, really early adopters of it because they could have long form conversations with their pals and just chat shit basically. And that's all podcasts have really been forever. It's just a kind of long form conversation where anyone can start one. It's like a radio show, but you don't need to go through like the BBC and all that kind of stuff.
And as you said as well, Cam, you know that you're talking about RSS and how it used to be so technical. You know, we've obviously got experience of how that works now, and it's really no difficult. Once you have a file or an audio or a video, you know, wait for it to download. It's probably the most time consuming thing.
Yeah, I would agree. Yep.
And then off you go. You know, so it's so much more accessible. If you know, look at us two, for example. If we can do it, anybody can do it.
But that's sort of because it does a lot of it for you now, and it's the way it should be. You know, I think a lot of the time, like early adopters of podcasts, and are a wee bit kind of not jaded, but I think they're definitely a bit like, well, man, we were the first to do this, and we're not getting the recognition for it and stuff like that. And it makes sense. I can understand why people in the early days would be a bit more like, why Joe Rogan wasn't the first one to start it all. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it's a completely different landscape now, especially with the addition of video. But that wasn't the case at all. It was like basement in your mum's basement where like microphone and stuff like that, and the audio quality wasn't great, but no one cared, man. People were just like, this is cool. I can listen to people from all around the world, and I just quickly gained a lot of traction. And my dad was at the very, very first podcast convention in LA and stuff like that. So just a completely different world from what it is now. Yeah.
All right. So I guess coming back to your story, so the schematics, diamond cutters, swiftly came to an end thanks to COVID. Your dad started podcasting again with Neil. Talk us through how that then transpired into where we're sitting today, and the business that you both run together.
So purely through fanatical egotism, I think, of just a kind of like, let's just get a studio, man. Let's see what happens. So from where we are now, we're in the Abercrombie Business Centre now, but originally we started in the Templeton building, so it's just across the green, well, not even across the road. And we were like, we'll contact them and see if they've got any spaces, and we'll just do it for a laugh. We'll go in and we'll rock up and we're like, yeah, we've got like a really successful podcast. Just wondering how much this floor would actually be to rent out, you know, for all our different, and but we went and we were like, we probably won't, we'll see what it's like. And then we saw the room, and if you've been in the Templeton building, it's a beautiful old like carpet factory. So it's like I think it's like original flooring. So that's like kind of dark oak and brick walls, and it's just they're really stunning, like really well lit, natural lighting coming into them all the time. The rooms and we were like, this could be really cool. And we kind of got a wee bit, we were buzzing about it, and like walked away from the viewing, and we were like, should we just go for it? Should we just like sort of crunch the numbers? And like Neil was doing enough with his business, we were doing enough with things on the side that were like we could afford the rent, and we had loads of different equipment ready to just kind of pull into the space and just be like, right, let's do it.
And was your intention at that point to find a space to host your dad's podcast rather than it being a space that you could actually turn into a business for yourself?
It was turning it into a space for a business was an afterthought.
Right.
Ridiculously. We were very much like, this is a space for social media ruins everything. And through that, the space was big enough that we're like, well, we could build another set for clients that want to just come in and we can produce their podcast for them.
Right.
So there'd be a set for social media ruins everything and a set for just normal sort of clients that want to come in. And originally we had ideas of like putting, so like these things here that you'd find in maybe like a bank or something, we were going to get like wooden sort of ones like that, but put them on wheels and like kind of wheel them out and be like a really modular space. But we quickly found out after we moved in and got some of like the soundproofing things in and all that there was a train line that ran directly beneath the window.
Oh god.
So you're trying to record audio and it's the train line from Central to Bridgeton, and it's like every like 10 minutes or so.
It's rickety a bit.
It's like, fucking loud. It just echoes because there's two tunnels, so it comes out of a tunnel and it echoes, and then it goes into another tunnel and it echoes, and the wind just like sort of blows up through just like right up the building. So it was our first day in, and all of a sudden we're hearing this like really low rumble, and then whoosh, and we're like a fucking plane taking off next to the building. So what would have been a really joyful day of this is going to be, we've got everything set up, this is great, we're like looking out the window watching trains passing and setting the mics up and listening through headphones, and we're like, oh no,
this is too much.
What the fuck have we done? So,
and had you agreed to like a lease?
I think it was like a 6-month lease or something like that.
Right. Okay.
It was just some of the darkest times that as a business owner you can have, but also as people that like weren't actually looking to set up a business, but we're like, if this isn't going to work for us, how can we even?
Aye.
So I think we were in the space for like a month or something, and Neil lives in like Loch Goylehead, so it's like an hour and a half commute or something.
Right.
And he was like, I can't keep commuting. So what we originally got the space for no longer existed. Right. We weren't doing social media runs everything.
Right.
And what we were going to use the space as a backup is now not really functional because we've got this train going past all the time. So we were just left in a kind of like, do we cut our losses? Do we just go, right, that's it, tried it, it's not going to work? Or do we just put everything that we have into trying to make this space work? So
what did you decide?
Guess what we did. So we started just like buying things to try and make sure that we were soundproofing the room. We were moving furniture about. We got like this fucking. So I don't know if I can. So apologies. I don't know. I'm the one editing this. I'll
go for it, mate. You know what we're like.
We got this like barn door from it was Shelter that we used as like a. So similar to like this, we were putting the mics on it, but it was like riveted. So it had these like massive rivets, as a barn door does, like that we couldn't find anywhere to like actually put the mic arms. So it was like trial and error with things like that. We were like, this is going to need to go, blah blah blah. We got these. So when you're sitting over at the table set, the curtains, they're like like actual stage curtains, and we had like 2 of them, so we had them across and then another set against the window where the train was to try and mitigate the noise coming in.
Right.
And then we ended up kind of creating a more or less like a pod around the podcast set with curtains to try and stop the sound from bouncing around these brick walls and like the wooden floor. But just nothing cut out the low frequency hum.
Was there anything that got rid of it?
No, nothing. Like, it was always there. Mm-hmm. So it was fine if no one was talking. We could put the noise gate up on the mic so that you wouldn't hear it. But then as soon as you were talking and the train would go past, you'd hear it. And for some folk, it probably wouldn't matter. But for us, we were like, we didn't feel comfortable having people into the space and selling this product and it being not as great as it could be. Because the both of us in different ways are perfectionists. And it kind of, there's pros and cons to being a perfectionist, but there's probably more cons than there are pros. But it at least allowed us to have a bit of integrity and be like, we're not going to be selling this to, can't sell this to folk.
And were you quite, when you knew that was an issue, were you quite clear with people that you are aware of it? You know, or did you just kind of wait to see if they brought it up?
I always just waited to see if they noticed.
Right.
And what would end up happening more often than not was folk would come into the space and be blown away. Mm-hmm. Because it's like a beautiful building, and the room was like, it was a stunning kind of big square box of a room, and all the lights and stuff like that, and people were like, oh wow, okay, cool. And then you get to talking, and by the time the first train went by, you were kind of deep in talk, so that someone wouldn't be like, what the but you could kind of see it in their eyes. There was a bit of like, and whether or not that was paranoia on our end or not.
See, I would have been looking up train timetable times and putting in demos when I knew the train was going to be.
But you couldn't, no, you couldn't, because
I'm just
cause how long were you guys were maybe in 15 minutes the first time you came to see the studio, right? Like 2 trains would have gone by in that 15-minute time. Yeah. We couldn't plan anything around.
And even if not, if you don't notice and then you record one, you record a couple, and then you listen to it back, you're going to hear it and go,
We noticed it, and that was the biggest thing. We noticed it. Ridiculously, the very first client that we ever had in that space was it was like a train council kind of thing. So like, it was like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something to do with like making trains like better for folk to be on and stuff like that. So we were like, all right, great, fucking class, thank you so much for using our space. And I think that we had like another 1 or 2 other clients. We had Biffy Clyro in,
right?
And they were doing a live sort of interview with Amazon because they had a new documentary about their new album. So one of the guys comes in, and I think it's the drummer, and he puts his headphones on, and a train goes past, and he goes, "Is that the subway?" We're like, no, it's just the trains. Don't worry about it. Listen, you won't hear it.
I thought you were going to say he was going to do a live gig, and then the train noise would have
No, like that would have. It was just like constantly mitigating the sound of these trains, and it was just like so stressful.
Yeah,
because we couldn't ever properly market the space.
Yeah. And looking back in that, Cam, because I know for a fact if that was me, I would have done almost the exact same thing. I would have got so excited by the look of the space that I would have forgot about everything else.
Jump in, head first.
But looking back in that, thinking about lessons learned, how long did it take for you to decide, right, we need to get out of this space? And was there anything you thought, I'm never going to do that again?
I've actually not got the time frame or the timeline right in my mind. I'm not good with that kind of stuff. I think it was we were maybe in there for about 4 months or something.
Yeah, okay. So it was short-lived.
Yeah, it wasn't. We kind of quickly were like, right, we can't do this. Right. The trains, they were doing work on the train line, so I think for like a month there was no trains, and it was great. They were like, oh, we could really make this work. And then the train started up again. We were like, nah, we need to get out of here. So we'd previously seen a space in here, and we were like, will we try again? Like, just to your question, it's a case of, do you scrap it, or do you just go, we'll try it again?
When is this, just for context?
So we moved in. This is 2021, I believe.
2021, right?
2021.
Just after COVID, really, after the first lockdown.
Yeah. So no, it's 2022. I'm so bad. I'd need to actually look back and like picture on my phone for pictures to see. But I think it was maybe 2022. It was like the winter. It was shit. It was dark. It was cold, rainy. So that's like adding to all the kind of stress and stuff like that. And I think it probably was around COVID, because you couldn't really go out and go to the pubs and stuff like that. But yeah,
so you come in here, and do you know, it's easy enough now when you walk in and it's like, it's amazing, it looks incredible, it feels incredible. But I would imagine at the time when you come in, it's just an empty room.
Yeah. So compared to, this is a great building, and the folk and staff that work here are great. Like, they manage it really well. But compared to the Templeton, in terms of like sort of stature and grandiose like hallways and floorboards and brick walls, this was just like a Magnolium room with carpet that needed pulled up and put back down again, because the carpet was mocket. So we're like, how would we do this? And this part of the room here was always 2 sets. So this space never used to look like this, because this is kind of like a chat show now. This was more these chairs and like these boards, but put along like vertical. It didn't look complete for a long time. Right. That was always, the table set was always, it's been the same pretty much ever since we moved in. But behind us there, where the sort of producer desk is, that used to be, we used to have our desks in there. So when we had clients in, one of us had to like step out and work on our laptop and whatever. But for a long time we weren't busy enough that was the case, like that we had to. It was only after a while where we were like, we can't keep working on our laptops in the kitchen.
All right, well, you agreed to take this space on.
Yeah.
So another leap of faith, I guess. And I dare say there's many people that after experience number 1 would have thrown the towel in and thought, we tried it didn't work. But you're at it again.
Yep.
And then I'm guessing when you've went at it again, it's through a lens of, right, we're going to go at this as a proper business. We'll have it as a studio for hire, or multiple studios.
Got the branding. We've done the branding and all that kind of stuff. Really thought about what we wanted the space to be like, how we wanted clients to feel when they were coming in and stuff like that. So that kind of was a lot of the thinking process to setting up this, like what the sets looked like and stuff like that.
And hats off to your dad for picking the brand name. You can tell he's got a background in SEO. The Glasgow Podcast Studio. You can
that's how you found us, didn't you? Just to search Podcast Studio. I know, but it's got a nice ring to it as well. It's just like and. That was clever. So it was always called that from the get-go. It was always just Podcast Studio Glasgow.
So how did you go about ultimately finding clients to get the business up and running? Was it just the name was that good that organically you were getting a lot of inquiries, or did you have a few that were referring?
It was so a lot of the original clients came in through just finding us online, and then people start referring, and they're like, "Oh, this is great." And what the best part about the kind of business model is that you're having folk that are coming in for interviews all the time. They do the podcast, they really enjoy it, they get a nice buzz from it, and then they're like, "Oh, I want to start my own." So a guest that was like that this has happened with you guys. You've had a guest in, and then they've come back and viewed the space, and they're like, "Oh, we'd like to start one." So it's a really, really easy way of referring people into using the space.
It's clever,
but it's all down to kind of how we manage clients, how we speak to folk, the work process. Because if you had a shit experience in here, it would be the quickest way to ruin our business would be for you to be like, "Have you tried that place? I mean, it's all right."
Like,
but
to be honest, the studio looks incredible, right? But for us, probably the most important thing, like we've been talking about getting this started for a while, and initially thought we'll just set up a space in our office, like we'll buy the equipment that we need, we'll have a wee dedicated corner in the office that we don't really use. And then when you really start looking into what you need, the experience that you need, the technicalness, we were a bit like, I wonder if there's another option. And then, you know, as you said, Googled Podcast Studio Glasgow. Mum will go and have a look, come in and see news. And you're almost like, you're sold immediately in terms of like, you walk in and it's like, how the fuck are we going to emulate this? First and foremost, we're no. And then, you know, post-production, editing, figuring out how we put stuff where it needs to go. So I guess that's maybe a question that I'll throw over to you, or not a question, but if there's anybody listening or watching that's thinking, I'd love to start my own podcast, do I do it myself in my bedroom, in my office, or do I go to a professional studio? What are the benefits of using you guys versus just setting it up on your own?
Well, I think it comes back to our love of sort of audio quality and just generally quality of equipment and final product. We could have stayed in that place over there with the trains, but we took the plunge again to come here and create a quality product that is, in our very humble opinion, unmatched in the rest of at least Glasgow, if not Scotland. So if you're going to do it at home, go for it. Have fun doing it like that, and kind of like sharpening your podcasting skills and stuff. But if you want to make a right proper go at it, come in somewhere like here. There's a great buzz about the space. You know, we're nice folk. We like talking to clients. We enjoy a chat. We'll help you with stuff like editing and how to kind of talk to clients talk to like guests and stuff like that. It's a different experience. It's a day out kind of thing, you know. If you're going to have someone on, if you're going to have a guest, I definitely recommend coming in somewhere like here. If it's a solo podcast, have at it in your kitchen, you know. It's not going to, it'll be decent quality, but it's not going to rival anything that you'll have in here.
Yeah, I echo that, I would say. I think from thinking about, I mean, we're still new to the game, very new, still learning the trade, but there's something about having you guys that gives you a little bit more, maybe confidence, but also a little bit more encouragement to keep going.
Yeah. Because
we know that you guys are there, you're looking after us, you know, I mean, I couldn't work 10% of the kit that I can see in here. So there is something about that, you know, thinking about the options if you want to start a podcast. Really, there's two. There's do it yourself or get someone like you guys to do it.
Yeah.
I was really surprised when we first started doing podcasting. I think it was you, Brian, that told me that said only 1% of podcasts get to 21 episodes.
Yeah, I think it's even less than that.
Is it less than that? I think
it's less than that.
What do you think, Cam, is the key reason behind that?
I think there's there's loads of reasons. I think the biggest one is that things like that just run out of steam. If you're, it's like writing a novel. You can get the first couple of chapters done and that original burst of creativity has been used up. And then from there, it's a kind of case of, right, let's put the hard miles in now. Things like that. And I also think it's really, really easy to be discouraged by podcasting. A lot of things like kind of social media and things advertise a kind of quick success. You can become an overnight sensation with like a really successful Instagram reel or TikTok. Podcasting's a lot of the hard miles. Like, it's a bit of a graft. You really put it in and you slowly build it up. So any podcast that you might think is an overnight sensation, like Joe Rogan or try to think of another one, like Cy Ferry and his lot, they put in a lot of hard hours into kind of perfecting how they interview folk, getting their set right, having loads and loads of quality guests to the point where people want to come back and listen, but also having a wide enough portfolio that they're pulling in loads of different folk from anywhere. So it's not strictly business, it's not strictly sport, it's just general kind of life and speaking about that. So I think that really is the biggest thing that puts people off eventually, is they're like, I'm not seeing much growth here. I'm putting a lot of time into it, which again is why I would, because if you're doing it yourself, you're putting a lot of time into it and it's getting 10 downloads. If it's not a labour of love, you're going to quickly be like, I'm not enjoying this.
I've got I'll call them theories because I've got nothing that supports it, right? But my two theories are the first one you've touched on. Social media drives that immediate gratification nowadays, and if they don't see that, then it's like, oh, it's not working, I'm just going to get in. And then the second one is, I think people often get into it for the wrong reason. So like, we've get into it primarily just because we thought that'll be something fun to do. It'll be enjoyable.
You can go get lunch afterwards and stuff like that, you know?
Exactly, mate. It's like, I wake up on a Tuesday knowing that I'm coming here with a wee spring in my step because I think, what a fun thing to do as part of my job.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
to come
it's
in
out the office and stuff like that as well.
Exactly. Whereas I think a lot of people go into it thinking, I'll be able to sign clients through this, I'll be able to get more business. If that happens organically, brilliant. Yeah. But it's not really the reason that we're doing it. We're doing it just because it's
people
enjoyable.
Can smell that a mile away, can't they? Any kind of an authenticity in terms of how you're speaking to someone, you can smell it a mile away. So if you're having someone onto your and I've seen it kind of from behind the scenes, and you're having someone onto your podcast, and you know that it's more just that you're actually just having a kind of like business meeting, but it's recorded. Sometimes it's really kind of, it's a bit stale because it's like really kind of technical stuff that you're talking about, and if that's what you're doing, that's fine. But if it's also a kind of like really, really technical, and then you're frustrated that you're not getting 100,000 downloads on it, it's just going to fall apart really quickly. So going back to kind of, it's a labour of love. It's something that you enjoy doing, you know, you get to talk to folk and kind of get an insight into a business that you don't work in. It really kind of allows you a wee bit more, it widens your horizons a wee bit in terms of what you can do on your own, you know. I don't know. I think coming into a space like this is with a wee bit of buzz about it. There's a wee bit of anxiety as well, obviously, because there's cameras and lights and stuff, but the kind of experience you get after that of like, oh man, I can't believe I did that, is much more fulfilling. I
tell you one thing, it is great for me. We started this in January. We're now fully booked up until May. And I think a large part of that is when we reach out to guests to say, do you want to come on? Obviously, we'll say, you know, here's a wee link to Facebook or TikTok or some of the stuff we've done already. I think when they see that and it's in the studio, a nice environment, they can see that the audio quality, the video quality is top notch. That then gets a potential guest excited versus if it was me in my bedroom or me and Barry in our office. I was going to say me and Barry in my bedroom.
We'll come back to
OnlyFans. So I definitely think from a guest booking perspective, it's helping. So I'd like to ask you a question, and I like to ask every guest this, right, about the kind of almost tipping point. So was there a moment or a period after you had moved in here, you had started getting clients coming in the door, bit of referral business happening? Can you remember, was there like a singular point where you and your dad thought, this is really starting to work here, this is taking off a wee bit?
That's difficult because with every new client that we got, we were like, oh, this is great. This is, you know, and sort of, it was weird for a wee while, like numbers kind of took a back seat and we were more just like really hands-on with folk that were coming in and super excited for folk to see the space, and because we're really, really proud of it. And we love folk coming in just to have a look, and even better when they kind of book. So we were like so engrossed in that it got to the point where we took on a second room through there, which used to be both of our office, so out here and there, and it meant that we could continue working while people were in here. And I think that's when it really started to kind of pick up a bit of momentum for us, and we were like, right, we've got an office space now and the studio. It felt a bit more real, a bit more kind of not sort of handcrafted. It was a wee bit more kind of like
taking it seriously.
Like we've got two kind of overheads now, you know, where we really need to start churning the clients, and not churning, like getting loads of stuff on social media and all that kind of stuff. And so we were like, right, let's go head first into the social media side as well, because we hadn't done a lot of that. And it really, we found that once we started doing that, surprise, it really kind of took off.
And what was your social media strategy, Cam, in regards to getting new clients in? How did you go about that?
It was showing the quality of the space. So loads of screenshots, people behind the mics, because we could show like the kind of like the quality of cameras and the microphones, but it's those two things combined with the person in the seat that really makes it a space that you want to be in. Because you can have an empty seat and you're just like, all right, great. I mean, you can picture yourself in it, but it really helps to have someone behind the mic smiling and talking. And we just kind of created loads of content based around all the folk that we were having in. So kind of compilations of people talking and smiling and, you know, just looking like they were enjoying the space. And then from there, kind of branching out into, well, why are podcasts important? Because we've sort of felt that someone's going to do a podcast either way. They can feel that it's important to them. But when it comes to sort of businesses and stuff like that, it's a case of trying to get across why it's important for your business. Because if you're doing it as a hobby and, you know, it's like you're having your mates on and chatting, you don't really need to have a great reason, you know, you're just like, this is fun, I enjoy doing this. But when it's a business and you're kind of, you've got your own overheads and you're like, right, I don't know if we can budget for a podcast. That was more a kind of case of like technical marketing, where it's like, here's what we can supply you with, here's why it's important for your business, you know, that kind of thing. A
bit of like real life content, you know, this is the experience, but also a bit of educational stuff in there as well. I've got another question for you, Cam, right? So we kind of spoke about why podcasts fail. So I don't know how many podcasts you've worked with over the years. If you know the figure, let us know. But is there any key characteristics or traits that you see in successful podcasts?
Always a podcast that has a good engagement with their audience. See, when folk have kind of things like questions coming in from their audience and all that kind of thing, that's, I suppose, more so for podcasts that are the same two guests or same two hosts, and it's like a really kind of niche topic. That always is great. Podcasts that, just going back to like a niche topic there, so podcasts that are within a sort of industry or sector that is quite high paced and there's loads of things going on, there's a nice buzz about it. That always is really nice for a quick sort of jag in the arm for listeners, I suppose. But generally just podcasts that have like interesting folk on, there's interesting chats, the hosts are good, they've got good questions coming in, stuff like that. It's hard to pinpoint like anything, the exact root of what makes something successful, because we'd be like selling that for £1 million, you know, if we knew
the answer,
the answers. But there's just a few key things, like just being consistent with your podcast, enjoying it and making sure that you're sort of putting the best foot forward in terms of who you've got on, keeping consistent with things like your own social media with your podcast, all that kind of stuff. That's become a massive thing. Like Reels and TikTok.
Yeah, we're finding that out firsthand, aren't we, a little bit around the importance.
You know, if I can share it in with any, I guess, you know, budding podcast producer or host, I probably came into it quite naively. Even once we knew that we had you guys on board helping us, thought, we'll fly around on a Tuesday, we'll record it, it takes an hour and a bit. You know, maybe another wee hour after that for a bit of stuff on social media, and that'll be us. It's like any other business, really. It takes effort, like, you know, from creating shorts to figuring out a social media strategy around, are we doing them all? Are we doing Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook? Are we doing just a couple? And then, you know, responding to questions that come in, there's graft involved. It's not just I turn up, record it, and we're off to the races.
For some folk it is as well. For some folk they're just like, I want just the bare bones of it, and I'm just going to put it out on YouTube as is, and that works for them. Other people are like, I want to craft a wee bit of a story around it and put a wee bit of labour of love into it, and it's kind of thinking about, well, I probably wouldn't post the same thing on LinkedIn that I would TikTok. But then kind of allowing TikTok and your social medias to kind of have their own life as well. You find that a lot of like more successful TikToks or podcasts have like their own TikTok following, and there's a crossover between who listens to the full podcast, but a lot of the times it's just like I like listening to the sort of short content of it. Like
I love those clips, admittedly. Like when I'm on TikTok, my For You page is just full of clips of people on podcasts that last a minute. Like they really reel me in. I don't know what it is, they just tend to grab my attention.
Sort of motivational music underneath and stuff like that. You're like, oh man, I feel like this is really educational, it feels good to listen to, kind of thing. It's loads of stuff like that. It's a weird world. We've even seen folk doing adverts on what they claim to be a podcast, but it's quite clearly just they've set up a podcast studio just to make an advert for something, kind of thing. If that makes...
I was talking to your dad about that before today's episode, and I was saying, to me now, I spot them on social media. I've not seen them in ads, but I've definitely seen them in social media clips where they create the clip to make it look like they've been asked a question on a podcast, but they're not on a podcast. They're just like in their office, in their room. Yeah,
we've seen people do it in here. It's really interesting to watch. It's really interesting because they craft it really well. It's a bizarre world with that kind of stuff. Just don't believe anything you see online.
Well, just having a think about again some of the questions that, for those that are listening, think I fancy like doing what you do, not necessarily hosting a podcast, but setting up a business around producing a podcast, having a studio. What are some of the more challenging aspects of doing what it is that you guys do every day and every week?
It's probably, there's a couple of things. I think it's, for me, it's dealing with deadlines at times. But from another point of view, it's kind of managing client expectations. You want clients to agree with your workflow. We've got like a really kind of strict workflow on how we get files out, how we edit, because it's time. It takes quite a lot of time to kind of make sure that we're getting the quality of product that we want out to you guys. But we also, in return, want you guys to kind of agree and work with us in terms of how we work, because it's kind of technical and stuff like that. So if anyone was kind of looking to set up their own studio, it would be to kind of get that workflow down first and understand how you want to send files, because the file sizes aren't small, they're fairly large. So kind of creating a streamlined process and how to get the files to the clients, because at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing. That's really what matters, is you guys getting it in a timely fashion and being happy with the end product.
That's one of the things that we probably discovered early on, is around, how slick you guys were with getting files over to us, but even just downloading the file, you forget like an hour-long video takes a bit of time.
Yep.
So see that workflow you're talking about, we even said to you, it's great working with you guys. We know that we come in, record, you send us a file later today, we send you the edits back, and then a video magically appears out of thin air. It's great. So from our perspective, you guys are spot on, you and your dad. But how long did you think did it take you to get that perfected, that flow?
It took ages and ages and ages. It took kind of trying different pieces of actual hardware and different pieces of software. So even things like a file, managing files and sending them, you could use Dropbox or something like that, but we opted for WeTransfer, because it's just a case of you just generate a link, and you're not like, this person can be an editor of this, or is allowed access. It's just a case of you send that link to anyone and they've got access and they can download it. And then it sort of came down to the actual hardware of storing video, because each video, so this is, how long have we been going for? I can't see, maybe about 43 minutes or something. That file is probably about, the whole thing is probably about 60 gigabytes or something by now. So actually trying to store these massive it's like an hour long, right? But you're getting each video isolated file from each camera is being saved. Each track of audio is being saved. So these are like, they're massive files. So how do we kind of organize it and make sure that we can find what we're looking for? So it's about kind of like naming files correctly. like, man, just the list. Actually, the list on that goes on and on and on. But managing files right, having the hardware to store files as well, because we don't really like to get rid of stuff, because someone could come back in like 2 weeks and be like, can you actually swap that and this? So we're sitting with podcasts that have maybe been recorded back in like December. We're like storing that.
I've never actually thought of asking you that, actually. So do you keep every episode of everything that you've recorded pretty much? I
keep, at the very least, the fully edited. So for example, you guys, you've signed off, or you've like uploaded all the podcasts that you've recorded so far.
So they're there. If we ever want to get them, we can get them.
Yeah, but because the editing's done, I get rid of a lot of the sort of behind the scenes files. So like the kind of unedited and sort of scratch audio and things like that. I just delete all of that.
Right. Okay.
And just keep the final fully edited podcast with the kind of music and the graphics and all that kind of stuff. So that it means that, you know, if you guys ever lose it, we've got it, but we can use it as well for things like our social media and stuff like that. So we don't like to delete everything. So we've got like terabytes of hard drive space worth of things that we've recorded.
I guess it's like any other business in that sense. So ultimately what we're talking about is systems. It's creating a system that works for you and your clients, and being at the other side of that, we've almost had to create our system that complements your preferred way of working and vice versa. So it's like, you know, there's 3 years typically that host it. Andy's obviously away sunning himself up for the 15th time in 2024 already, so he's not here today. But I had to get that dig in, sorry. But there was an element of like the first time you shared the file with us, the three of us were like, obviously we're excited as well. So like, we'll all download it. And then we were all listening to it, and it's like, right, are you keeping note of what needs to go back to Cam? Am I keeping note? Right, you do it this week. You maybe. So it's like we create a system at our end in time. It doesn't happen. Episode 1.
But that again, though, that's like the easiest way to keep a podcast going as well, is to create like a system that means that it's the least amount of work possible to keep it, because you are weekly. It's like a lot of work doing a weekly podcast. So it's about kind of streamlining all of that stuff. And we've in the background had to streamline all of our systems so that we can like have a client come in, you guys are in, and you go away within the end of the day, you've maybe got the file, but meanwhile we're like uploading stuff and sort of bringing clients in and having a chat with them, you know. So there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff that happens with that. Once you guys leave, we're dealing with other clients and we're speaking to them, and then we're getting their files ready. It's all that kind of stuff, and it's like there's loads of analogies you could have for it, but it's kind of like a baker where you buy your pie and then you're up the road, but he's up at like 4 a.m. making the pastry and you know, doing all that kind of stuff. So when you guys arrive, everything's ready and good to go. And we've streamlined that process down as well, where it probably takes us about 10 minutes to swap from this set to that. Whereas before it was like, right, where's that fucking HDMI cable? And where did we put the mic cables? And like that was stressful in the beginning. That because we had loads and loads and loads of issues with it. And another thing as well is that like we'd be setting this up, and I had another job at the time. I was working 2 jobs, like this and something else, because like it just, in the beginning of any business, it doesn't wash its face for a while. So you're like, I need to try and find somewhere else to get a stable wage. So we're like running around here like mad, and then like, I need to go. And my dad's like, right, no, just go. But there's a client in, and it's all really, just really chaos. Yeah. So I think through experience and chaos, you're immediately like, I want a bit of peace.
Yeah.
And that is the quickest way for you to streamline any system that you've got, is through experience and bad systems.
I sometimes think about it as sometimes you need to feel the pain before you see the light and just make your changes. But I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned obviously software, hardware, you know, figuring out how everything works. You've got that. Throughout all of this, there's always the people element. You know, like us punters are here, you need to deal with the clients, right? So don't need to name any names or anything like that, but is there any times where you've been at the other end of a podcast and you thought, this is absolutely insane what I'm watching here? Has there been anything mental like that from an episode point of view?
There's been a, not naming any names, because I love all the podcasts in here. They're all fantastic. But there's been a couple of ones where it's like, well, a wee bit awkward, like the guests aren't maybe great. And there's maybe even sometimes like we kind of like tension, and you're just a bit like, oh God, man, this is rough. But there's been other ones on the other hand where it's like something that I never thought I would have been interested in. There was one in the early days, and it was like a kind of like dating podcast with these two girls, and they were sharing dating stories, and I was like, oh, that's kind of right, you know, a load of tripe. And then I watched it, and I was listening and producing it, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. Like, he did what? He was doing what? No, he didn't take notes. Take notes. Don't. I don't want to get into it because it's not exactly PG, but I'm gonna tell a story about that. I'll leave it. But so it goes both ways, where you're like, oh man, this is like with some of the stuff where so you guys are like SEOs and like all that kind of chat is nothing that personally I'm interested in. And we had a podcast on that was like super technical with sort of SEO and all that. We were talking like jargon and all that, and I was just a bit like, this isn't for me, and I was really like confused as to what was going on. But for folk that are in that space, that's great. You know, that was like, oh, this is exactly what they want to hear. So you're introduced to a lot of things that you're not really interested in, but kind of get you become a kind of jack of all trades with knowledge. You have a wee bit of everything stored away because you're just listening to folk talk all day, which is pretty interesting.
And do you find the managing clients aspect to the role, I guess, one of the more challenging parts, or is that just easy ozy?
I used to find that really, really challenging in the beginning, because when we started this, I was either 21 or 22. I had major kind of like social anxiety, especially talking to folk like you guys, where it's like, yous have had a full career. Yous have done things, you've been through the pains and struggles that we're going through just now, but can't really show. So trying to kind of speak to folk that had more knowledge than me, I felt like an imposter the entire time, you know. And only with time does that go away. And speaking to more folk and really kind of being like, no, I can do this, and I'm actually proud of what I'm able to do. And so that's easier now. I enjoy that a lot more than editing. I really, really love folk coming in and speaking to them, and because there's just always a nice buzz with folk when they come in, you know.
Well, you certainly fooled us, Cam. We never had any sort of idea that you were having those internal demons. But
man, yeah, that was a hard. I hated that in the beginning. Yeah. That was like one of the things that I was like, I can't do this, you know.
This is the fun part. Do you know? It's like the actual podcast, you know, being unfolded in front of you and folk chatting about nonsense.
And you don't know if what you're saying is making any sense. I'm going to listen back to this and be like, what am I talking about,
man? All right, cool. And as you know, because you're normally behind the curtain in every episode that we do, we always like to ask our guests, like, what does the future hold? So think about the next, 3, 5, 10 years. Is it just a case of enjoy it and see how it goes, or do you have any grandiose plans around scaling it even further?
I think, well, my dad's always got grandiose plans of scaling it further. I'm more just I'm always more just like, this is great, I love this just now, this is fantastic. And he's like, no, we want to be here, here and here. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, because that's kind of, I've always just been like, right, I'll follow you with it, I'll see where it goes. So for the time being in the future, we're doing well, it's great. There's loads of clients in that are really interesting and, have become pals and stuff like that. So I just want to keep doing this for, as long as it is fit. So what my future is, you're looking at it the now, this is it kind of thing. So yeah.
Brilliant. And now I've got another one, sorry to jump in. So that's the future of you guys, right? That's a bit of a big question, but what do you think the future of podcasting looks like?
Oh man, yeah, that is a future of podcasting.
If you think about where we were in 2005 when your dad started.
Yeah. I think podcasting is only going to grow. I think more and more people are going to try it out. I think it's going to become... I think probably studios are going to become more and more popular. I think people are going to keep... I honestly, I don't know. This question is just going to be I think.
Mm-hmm. No one really knows, to be honest, so don't put too much pressure on yourself.
I think the biggest thing is that you see the quality of online videos and like YouTube, for example, used to be just it was like fail videos and cats, but now people are producing like full length documentaries on really, really complex topics, and podcasting's always been in that realm. It's always been in that kind of, let's talk about the 2008 financial crisis as it's happening on a podcast, but it maybe didn't have the same quality of production value that you can get with video. So a lot of like true crime's massive, isn't it? And they've always got kind of like music that kind of, they're really telling a story and they're crafting it. Podcasting's coming into that more and more. Not that it wasn't like that, but YouTube definitely took a sort of speeded ahead with that kind of documentary style. I think the quality of podcasting is only going to increase as more and more are created. You know.
And I guess I'll maybe finish today by Barry's touched on some of it already, but as well as coming to see this studio and thinking, right, it looks incredible, so we'll give it a go. I remember turning up on day one and thinking, like, sitting on this seat and thinking, I don't actually know what we do here. Like, how do we start? Daft things, like, and you coming over going, right, there's normally an intro, and then you kick into your kind of script with your guest, and then there's a bit of an outro. So even like small hints and tips along the way, like, they've just helped massively. You know, because we had a bit of anxiety about getting this going as well, which is natural. But daft things like turning up on day one and sitting down here and looking at each other and going, what do we do now? And you just shouting from behind the curtain, right, this is what's happening. Like,
but that's just a product of the environment, I've actually learned that more from just watching people record their podcasts, and people that were really slick, so people like from the BBC and stuff like that have been in recorded podcasts, and they're really slick and they know what they're doing, and just kind of picking up wee tips from them on how they conduct an interview or command a kind of script and stuff like that. And so from there it's just a case of like, right, I want to give that piece of advice to the next person. It's even things like sometimes with certain clients that are super nervous, I'll just tell them, listen, I'm going to come round and I'm going to use the clapper board and I'll clap. Just take your time, start whenever. Time's not, don't worry about it,
I thought I was done with my questions, but I'm not. Right. What is the point of that clapper board? So I always have a wee giggle, see, like when you and your dad come over and do the clapper board, I'm like, that's what they do in movies. Like, what is the point of that?
The first time I seen it, I thought, oh shit, I'm in trouble. This is real.
It's to make you guys feel really, really, really important, really put you under pressure. No, it's so we record video through what's known as an ATEM Mini. So that basically through HDMI puts all the camera feeds into one, and then what you get is a live switched version of the podcast that I'm doing as you're talking. So if I was around there just now, that we'd see that moving with the different camera angles, which I'll do in post. But the audio is recorded through a roadcaster. So it's two separate feeds. So you've got the video feed and then the audio feed. Right, okay. Clapperboard is just an audio and video visual cue of where to bring the audio in and bring the video. Basically I go frame by frame until you see the clapperboard touch, and then I go frame by frame until I can hear the clapperboards like clap, and then I sync the two up from there. So whenever you see us doing that at any point, you're live, you're under the cosh.
There was my romantic view right out the window. That's just like old school.
But that is what that's what they do on movie sets and stuff like that as well, because they have like the boom mic and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, they'll also have like a time code and take scene, all that kind of stuff. But it's basically it's easier than me like actually clapping because you'll find that your fingers will get in the way or whatever. And it's really, again, that was part of the streamlining process of how to systematically make people feel at ease in here and just start the podcast and let them know that they're on the go kind of thing.
Well, that to me, that's normally the visual cue. Stop arsing about. It's go time.
Yeah.
Okay, mate. Well, listen, thank you very much for speaking to us today. It's been mega interesting, and just one final thank you for all the help and support so far. Really looking forward to continuing to work with you for the rest of this year. For anybody that wants to check Cam out, it's the Podcast Studio Glasgow. Would highly recommend the service. As always, give us a like on social media, follow all our pages. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks again, Cam.
Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.